It is time for Around the 412 with Smitty and Tyler.
Welcome back to another episode of Around the 412. I am Tyler. With me, as always, is my co-host, Smitty. Go follow us on all of our social medias at Around the 412. If you're not watching on YouTube already, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss a video, and let us know in the comments any questions that you might have for a future Steelers episode or any of our episodes, or just let us know what you like seeing. Also, follow us on all the listening platforms as well, like Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you find your podcast. And go check out the links in the descriptions of all of our great sponsors on this show. This is the Steelers show, and, man, we are at another Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, I got to start here. Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl. Is this the most, like, uninteresting matchup that could have happened for the Super Bowl, even though it was super likely that the Eagles and the Chiefs could have been the two teams? Like, is this just the most undesirable matchup that could have happened?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, especially, like, you know, as Steelers fans, I feel like we have a little bit of an in-state rivalry going on with Philly. We don't really care for them just because the cross-pollination that takes place with Flyers fans, knowing that they are also fans of the Eagles. And then Kansas City's just, they've been there. Like, you know, we went straight. I posted this yesterday, going straight from the Brady and Patriots dynasty directly into the Mahomes dynasty with the Chiefs, with no pause really in between, has, to me, made it probably the most unenjoyable time for NFL fans of every other fan. But for them, it's great. Obviously, what a time to be a Chiefs fan. I hope that the Eagles knock them off now. That's what I'm rooting for personally. I'm sure not everybody feels that way, but I feel like we've gotten to that. Just last year, I was still rooting for Kansas City to beat the 49ers. This year, I can't do it. I need somebody to knock off the Chiefs. I can't do it again. So, yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at with it. I think it's the least enjoyable time as a fan of anybody besides the Chiefs.
100%. I mean, I look at what they are, and you mentioned the Patriots. Like, compared to the Patriots, if you just objectively look at the two teams, they're not nearly as, like, dislikable for reasons outside of winning as I think those Patriots teams were, whether you're talking about the early Tom days or even the later Tom days. I just think that they're not as dislikable as far as, like, the actual personnel or the team itself. It's just winning gets tiresome if you're not the fan of the team that's winning. And I do not want to see a three-peat. I really don't, because I feel like that basically, once somebody three-peats, it kind of discredits anybody that's won back-to-back. So, like, the Chiefs have won back-to-back, but Steelers, for example, are a team that won back-to-back. They've done it twice in the 70s. Like, that's something that I feel like anybody who has won back-to-back before, that just gets thrown out the window now. And all of a sudden, it is just the three-peat, and that's all anybody's going to think about. And also, I don't know why, and I feel like I should just get this take out here, because I've thought this for a while. This is not me saying the NFL is rigged whatsoever, so no one think that I'm saying that. But when I say that the NFL definitely loves having the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl, I feel like that is, like, 100% true. And the reason being, the most eyes are on any given sport when there are quote unquote dynasties happening. I feel like whether it is because you love the team or because you hate watch the team, which a lot of people are going to be doing for the Super Bowl. Granted, it is the Super Bowl, so people are going to be watching anyway. But I feel like the NFL executives are loving that Kansas City made it, because all eyes are on them. And I feel like it just brings more attention. I mean, I look at others across other sports, when teams are winning consecutively, whether it's basketball, hockey, or baseball, I just feel like those sports are at their highest moments whenever they have that. As annoying as it is for all the other fan bases, I feel like the most interest is when they have dynasties like that.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody that hasn't gone in, like, I'd have to go and look at the viewership. obviously, like the NFL popularity has continued to climb. But when you talk about the other sports, I'm not sure what viewership has been like when we've gotten to like, the Warriors are the team that I think of when it comes to the NBA for a team that had a level of success that kind of, to me, felt tiresome. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, yeah, the officiating is going to be a big conversation, especially because of, the fourth down stop on Josh Allen, where like, we shouldn't still be doing this thing now in 2025 where we can't know exactly where the ball should be spotted. Like we have the technology or should have the technology in place to be able to know exactly where that football got to. To me, looked like he got to the line that he needed to gain to get a first down, and then who knows how the game goes. But it's neither here nor there at this point. Yeah, to me, it's just I had a moment of yesterday feeling like, and if I tweeted this and people that don't watch football and didn't realize I was watching the game, they were probably like, oh, this dude's like, is he okay? Because I just tweeted, what's the point? And it was regarding the Kansas City Chiefs and basically having that feeling if you're like every other team in the National Football League. If you're the Ravens and have Lamar Jackson, if you're the Bills and have Josh Allen, the Bengals and have Joe Burrow, you feel like you have that dude at that position, and it doesn't matter right now because you're in this run right now of the Chiefs and Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid, and like they're always going to find a way, and you just feel like you've built one of the best football teams you could possibly build. You have that dude at the most important position, and it doesn't matter. And then on the other side of things, you're building a football team basically the exact opposite way. Like if you look at the NFC compared to the AFC, other than Jaden Daniels in Washington, he's the one guy that like you look at that roster, no business being in the spot that they were, but largely were due to coaching and Jaden Daniels because it's not a very good roster. Everybody else is building their team the complete opposite. It's like putting the structure where you can just drop in a quarterback. No one's going to like Jalen Hurts is a good player. He is not amongst the NFL elites at the quarterback position. He's going to his second Super Bowl. You look at Brock Purdy and San Fran with the success that they had in the past, Jared Goff in Detroit. Like it's more about the ecosystem than the quarterback. So it's interesting. And of course, the Steelers are in the AFC and they got to contend with the quarterbacks that I mentioned. The four best in the league, probably 5 of the top 7. Like it's a quarterback driven conference for sure, more so than it is league to me right now, because I think you can get away with not having that dude at that position in the NFC. But either way, that's neither here nor there. This episode, 7.5 minutes into it, we'll let you know what we're going to do on today's episode. I mentioned this last week. Going to go through every single, all 24 free agents that the Pittsburgh Steelers have, unrestricted, restricted, and exclusive rights free agents on the team, and let you know if we think they're going to be back or not. Some of these are going to be pretty obvious for one way or another, but still have a discussion on quite a few here. And I want to start. Let's check some boxes because we're going to have conversations about some of these that might be more in depth. So I feel like the ones we can just knock off right away. Let's talk about the 2 exclusive rights free agents that they have, and that's Jeremiah Moon, Ryan McCollum. What do we make of these guys? Jeremiah Moon got some snaps, obviously, with the injuries that they suffered throughout the season on the edge, played some special teams. Then Ryan McCollum had to step in for a bit with the injury that Zach Frazier suffered as well. Exclusive rights free agent, just so you guys know. If the Steelers want to back, they're back. That's basically the way it works. As long as they tender them a contract, these guys can either accept that or choose not to play football. So do we think the Steelers want both of these guys back, one of these guys back? Where are we at?
I just feel like it's probably something the Steelers are going to look around at and see how easy is it to get a slight upgrade at either of these guys, because I feel like they both have like a little bit of value where you could argue that the Steelers should bring them back. I think Ryan McCollum, if Zach Frazier is your first center, I feel like Ryan McCollum is a fine backup center, can play in a pinch when you need him to. Obviously not somebody you want to see in there on game day, but I feel like he did fine enough, and it is doing fine enough where if they wanted to bring him back and they don't see a slight upgrade anywhere else in free agency or bringing one in, they could bring him back. Jeremiah Moon, I mean, he's the 4th edge rusher, kind of played off and on this year due to injury. I feel like the one edge that he may have, no pun intended, on anybody else that the Steelers may bring in is like some special teams areas. But that just depends on what they look at. I mean, neither of these guys really scream off the page that they need to bring them back, but I think that there is at least a somewhat of a case for either one where the Steelers could bring them back because they have their own areas where they have some value.
So I'll get into another player that's a free agent, why I think McCollum certainly will be. The interesting thing with Moon, and again, we saw him play defensive snaps, but the one thing that I will say is we kind of, and I'll have this conversation more when we bring up somebody else, I think we need to get away from guys that are exclusively special teamers. Like you look around the league and watch other teams, like you can't have that many roster spots, helmets on game day taken by guys that exclusively play special teams. Like I think you need
Yeah.
guys that can contribute also their respective side of the ball as well. And I'm just not so sure that Jeremiah Moon is a good enough edge rusher to do that. So like I know you're probably losing Preston Smith, like makes sense to cut. So unless you can bring him back on a different deal. I'm gonna say that they tender them both contracts. I don't know that they have to. McCollum I thought was serviceable enough, and I'll say that I would keep Moon around too, just because I don't know. I think that they could draft an edge at some point later on, but without knowing that for sure, I'll say Moon's back. But here's the thing: neither one of those guys guaranteed to make the 53.
No,
Like they'll bring him back for now.
To add my 2 cents on that, I would tender both of them contracts. And if I were to add like who I think out of the two would stay on the 53 when it comes next fall, I would say Ryan McCollum, at least to me, would be more likely than Jeremiah Moon right now, because I feel like Jeremiah Moon on the surface, I just think is more replaceable at his position, especially with what you brought up, playing defensive snaps, than someone like Ryan McCollum's going to be.
All right. I want to say there's only one RFA on the team, and it's a relatively big player to talk about. So we'll save that for now. Go through some of the offensive linemen here that are free agents. Max Sharping, Calvin Anderson. Actually, I think those are we didn't want to talk about him yet. So Max Sharping and Calvin Anderson, we'll talk about, 2 reserve offensive linemen that are UFAs. I mean, these are like Calvin Anderson, I guess is somewhat interesting. The tape actually wasn't bad. He had to play in the playoff game due to Dan Moore exiting with an injury. And it actually wasn't terrible. And Dan Moore is a free agent. We'll talk about him in a little bit too. Assuming a departure there, I could see Calvin Anderson being brought back. I'm going to say no on Max Sharping. Calvin Anderson's a little bit more of a toss-up, but I'm actually leaning yes. Just because, like, whether it's as a backup tackle, swing tackle, whatever way they want to utilize him, I don't think they're going to want to have to add 2 tackles. So if you got Broderick, Troy Fautanu, and Calvin Anderson, you're probably still looking for one other guy, but not 2 other guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually agree with you. I think Calvin Anderson will be brought back just because he has the versatility to be a swing tackle. And like you just mentioned, you wouldn't have to be replacing as much of your offensive line and much of your roster if you do tender him a contract like that. But with Max Sharping, I don't imagine that he would be brought back. And I think that someone that plays a lot into that is going to be like a guy like Spencer Anderson, being able to kind of take a spot from him, because I don't know what the guard spot is going to look like as far as 2025 goes. I mean, we have no idea. Like, is this Isaac Seumalo going to retire or not? Is he going to be on the team?
Congrats to Isaac, by the way. Made the Pro Bowl this year.
Yeah, that's cool. Kudos to him.
I would say didn't expect that, but
yeah. But like there's been like not really a speculation, I would say, but like thoughts like, what if he does retire, wants to hang him up? I know we had a big conversation about the rookie this year. I just don't think that with Spencer Anderson being there as well, I just don't think that the Sharping is going to be able to come back.
While we're on the conversation of offensive line, we'll throw in the other guards / center to talk about as well. I know that I mentioned James Daniels is a little bit bigger of a fish here, but we can mix them in places where it makes sense to. So James Daniels and Nate Herbig. Nate Herbig's the one I wanted to bring up earlier. I think him not being back, that's what I expect to have happen. I think he's gone, is why I'm giving Ryan McCollum like such a chance to make the 53, because I think that he could be the backup center next year. I think they'll move on from Nate Herbig. I mean, like, when you miss an entire year and it's in a contract year, I just think that's going to leave a bad taste in their mouths. I think they'll move on from him and just think that they can replace him for less money. And then James Daniels, I think on the opposite end of that, maybe here's the thing. You just brought up something that's interesting. A Seumalo retirement, I think, could open the door for him to be back. But assuming that Seumalo is going to be back for the final year of his contract, I think James Daniels walks, and he's still like, I know he's coming off a pretty major injury, but he's still relatively young. I think he can do well for himself on the free agent market. like guards are starting to get paid over the last couple seasons as well. So I'm expecting James Daniels to leave, but I'll say the door's a little bit more open for me just because of the maybe a little bit of cloud over whether Sam Allah will retire or not.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. I mean, and we talked about last week extensively, like how we felt about Mason McCormick being the starting center in starting guard in 2025. We don't think that necessarily should be like guaranteed to him. And it was an Achilles injury. So that's something that is major. And obviously, hopefully he healthily comes back. But that could be something that the Steelers may be able to bring him back on a cheaper contract than they initially thought whenever it came to negotiations earlier or I guess last offseason. So maybe that's a case. Right now I'd lean no for James Daniels, but that's one that is kind of like more tentative to just see how things play out as this goes along.
Let's get some other ones that I assume are going to be no's here, like CJ Henderson, who they signed to the practice squad. He's a free agent. Kyle Allen as well. Like I think them going and getting, I think they just want to reshape the bottom of that quarterback room. So they go and get Skylar Thompson, who I don't think is guaranteed to be the QB3 by any means either. I think it very well could be, we'll talk about the other free agent quarterbacks that they have here, but very well could be one of the other guys, a mid-round draft pick. And then I don't know how much smoke you want to put into this. Tony Pauline put out that the team has interest in a guy like Joe Flacco. So like if they wanted to go, like if it's not Russ, I think it kind of makes sense. Say it's like Justin Fields, Joe Flacco draft pick, and then Skylar Thompson doesn't make the team. I think that makes sense. So I will say no on Kyle Allen being back and no on CJ Henderson being back.
I mean, first off, I did not know about Joe Flacco. I did not hear that, and so that would be a wild QB room to me. Having
third
Justin
team in the
Fields.
AFC North.
Yeah, that would be wild, especially just being who Joe Flacco is and the aura around him in the Steelers, and that would be completely throwing me off if that did happen. But as far as Kyle Allen goes, I don't think he's going to be back. I feel like Skylar Thompson being signed was just basically writing on the wall that Kyle Allen is going to be moved on from, and it's really nothing against Kyle Allen, but like when you're QB3, it's really just like plug in whoever at that position. You're probably never going to play, or at least they hope they never are going to play. And with Skylar Thompson being there, I just don't think it's going to happen. Although Kyle Allen, if you're just talking about anybody who has attempted a pass in a Steeler uniform, tied for first in completion percentage at 100%.
And it was to our boy Pat, his one completion. So yeah, I'm a no on him. CJ Henderson, I assume
CJ Henderson, no. Yeah. No.
Yeah. Didn't even actually see him, was on the practice squad. But yeah, who knows? He was a
pain, by the way.
First round pick, 10th overall. That's crazy.
In the 2020 draft, first year we were really like.
Sounds right.
20,
yeah. Sounds right. It's 2020.
Wow.
Anyway. So I'm assuming when Jacksonville took him, they thought he was going to be a game changer. What's going on, everybody? Smitty from around the 412, and I just want to take a quick second to give a shout out to our folks at Game Changers. Their logo on the screen right now, right above my microphone. Over 2,000 different designs in their catalog. Luxury heavyweight material. I am wearing one of their shirts right now. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Head over to gamechanger.la or pick6.la to pick up some shirts. And guess what? Use code AT412. Save yourself $10 on your order every single time. Again, gamechanger.la or pick6.la. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Check them out. All right. Continuing the conversation, where do I want to go now? Let's talk about some pass catchers, since we just talked about a quarterback in Kyle Allen. Van Jefferson is a free agent this year, as well as Michael Pruitt, a couple of Arthur Smith guys brought in. We can throw Ben Skoranek into that conversation as well. He is also a free agent. So, yeah, let's talk about those three together. Ben Skoranek, Michael Pruitt, Van Jefferson. What are we thinking?
Ben Skoranek, I think, is one that we also touched on last week talking about the Steelers, but I think that's one that is an easy comeback for me. I really like what he brings.
You want him back, or do you think the team is going to also view it that way?
I think the team will also view him that way, because despite what we're saying, where you have these special teams exclusive guys. I mean, I don't know necessarily that I would count Skoranek as that, but he's closer to that than he is an actual offensive player. But for what he can bring special teams, very useful. And I think that as a wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6, I think that that's something that the Steelers would be looking for. I think that he did a really nice job this season. And for me, that would be easy to come back. Like if he's wide receiver 5, 6 on this team, I'm totally fine with that. Van Jefferson, I think he goes. I don't necessarily think that it worked out in Pittsburgh. He had a little bit of a resurgence mid-season whenever they'd made the switch at quarterback. You saw a little bit more from him, but I just don't think that he ever really hit his stride in Pittsburgh. Wasn't the same receiver that he was when he was in LA and I mean, even Atlanta for that matter. And I just think that they could do better and move on and wash their hands from that. Michael Pruitt, though, I think it's interesting, and I think that it's going to come down to like how many tight ends are they going to be wanting to carry next year, because they do carry Pat and they do carry Darnell Washington and Connor Hayward as well. Whether you want to count Connor Hayward as a traditional tight end or not, that's up to you. But I just wonder if they carry 4 next year like they did this year, or if they do carry 4, do they look to add somebody else, or do they maybe even draft one late in this year's draft in the mid to late rounds? So I would say I'm leaning towards no with Michael Pruitt. I think there's too many options to bring in a different tight end. And for them, I don't even know if they're going to carry 4, but if they do, I just think it's going to be somebody else.
I agree. And I'll be honest, I think there's kind of an opportunity in front of them, and not enough people are talking about tight end, in my opinion, for where they could draft one in the middle rounds or pick up another one, because I think they need another pass catcher at the position. It wouldn't surprise me if they also moved on from Connor. Like, and kind of reshape that room besides Pat and Darnell. You want Pat because of what he can do as a pass catcher. You want Darnell for what he can do as a blocker. I don't think you got enough from the other two there. And I think that there's certainly the ability, because Arthur wants to play tight ends, but like when you're running 12 personnel, ideally you'd have 2 guys that you can utilize as pass catchers. I know a lot of people think like Darnell's underutilized as a pass catcher. He's super limited. I think a lot of people overrate what he's capable of doing. I think for what, like the one thing where I will agree on is I think you need to see more utilization of him in the red zone. But just between the 20s, like, I don't know what people are expecting to get out of him.
He's not a route runner. Like, he's not Pat in that sense. He's literally just a jump ball. You throw it up to him, he's going to catch it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, you can do some different, like, certain stuff with him, but it's not like this guy, runs an expansive route tree and is like some crazy, like, people looked at the way that he ran and tested, I think. But, like, watch his football speed. Like, it's not like he's that same athlete. So, yeah, I'm a no on Michael Pruitt. I'm a no on Van Jefferson. Everybody that covers the team or played with, great things to say surrounding Van Jefferson. Seems like a really good dude. It's just when you're talking about as many spots within that receiver room that need turned over, it's not a good enough room to justify bringing somebody like that back. Like, if they didn't have Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson under contract, maybe you could sign me up for him being wide receiver 4 or something on this team. But we know we have those 2 under contract. I'm in agreement that I want Ben Skoranek back. I expected George Pickens trade, so you're looking at 2 roster spots within that receiver room. Can't justify one of those being Van Jefferson. So Van Jefferson's on the outs. Ben Skoranek, like you, also in for me. Whether it is as a wide receiver 5 or even like if it is wide receiver 6, not saying that they're going to always dress 6 receivers, maybe use a healthy stretch at times, but like for what they want this identity to be, not necessarily what they've been successful at doing, but for what they want to be on the offensive side of the ball, running the football, he's their best blocking receiver by a mile. So I think they'll want him back. And then obviously the special teams contributions that you touched on as well. So I'm a yeah on Ben Skoranek too. Are we going to disagree about any of these? Some more defenders here. We'll go Isaiah Loudermilk. We'll take a look at him, what we think there. James Pierre, Tyler Medikevich, and DeMonte Casey. Let's lump all those guys in together. Some backup defensive players. We'll start with Isaiah Loudermilk. What do you think?
I think he's one that you can move on from. I think the defensive tackle is
he's
one
a toss-up
that
for me,
though. Yeah, I don't think he's an easy just cut him, but I think that there's a possibility that they move on from him. I think that defensive tackle is an area where they're going to look to improve. It's going to be one of the biggest keys in the draft, whether that is in the first round or at some point. I'm just not necessarily sure if he's going to come back, especially like, are you going to be keeping around Monty Adams and DeMarvin Leal? It would have been an easier answer for me if someone like DeMarvin Leal didn't have the like surge last summer that he did before getting injured this year. But I think with the Steelers likely bringing both of those guys back and
see, that's interesting because the reason that I'm leaving the door open is because I'm kind of expecting a Larry Ogunjobi cut, and I think they want to add defensive line help early. Maybe they double dip too. Maybe it's like something for agency and something in the draft. But it's just like I'm expecting the Ogunjobi cut, and while I'm expecting additions there, I can't for sure say that they're going to happen. And it's like, I could see wanting to bring him back cheap. Not that he'd be stepping into that role. It's Keanu Benton moving over, and then you're finding something else to play up the middle. But like for depth purposes, I think there's a path there, but I'm leaning no. It's just I don't want to fully roll it out.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Like I said, I'm leaning no just because of I feel like there's going to be, as far as additions, even if they move on from Larry Ogunjobi, I feel like they could either bring in like a free agent and draft one, and you're filling those spots regardless. And I just think that the depth is going to be filled elsewhere.
Yeah. All right, so that's Loudermilk. What about James Pierre? Another guy that kind of falls into that bucket of special teams. Really,
I mean, he's literally just a special teamer, right? Like I know he played corner a little bit more this season than a lot of people probably would have expected, but looking at, you have Joey Porter Jr., you have Dante Jackson and Corey Trice, and you probably expect them to add another one and bring one in. I don't know if he's necessarily going to fit the criteria of getting the defensive snaps to keep him around. And it just really depends on how much you value his special teams. Like for me, I would say he goes. I would say you probably don't bring him back, especially because of the atrocious mismanagement of that fake punt. I mean, from right there, if he would have been cut, I feel like it would have just been justifiable. But yeah, I just think that he's one of those ones that you kind of like you were talking about, where he doesn't really have value at his actual position enough, kind of like a Jeremiah Moon is only being a special teams guy and having those guys in there. Is that enough for your 53-man roster to justify keeping them around? So I would say no.
The reason that I'm going to say no is a bit different. It seems like they want to hand those keys to Corey Trice, and I feel like you have to, like, for that spot. So I like he's been injury prone and he's had some flashes, but not enough to like fully invest into, in my opinion. But like Jerry Dulac says that they're handing those keys to him. So they might draft one, it's line season right now. We're kind of in the midst of that. They should, certainly, in my opinion. You mentioned Dante Jackson. We'll talk about him in a second because he's also a free agent. But yeah, so I'll say the inclusion of Corey Trice is why I'm a no for James Pierre, not so much like James Pierre himself. Tyler Medikevich, he's a no for me. Got hurt this year. That's another guy, special teams only. I don't see the path. I think you got too many guys that are like him. You can find that pretty much dime a dozen. At one point, would have considered him a special teams ace. I don't know that I really saw that this year, even when he was healthy. So, I think they go a different direction.
I agree. I think that's one that you don't bring back. I expect your linebacker room, if he's around, like with Cole Holcomb being back, that's another roster spot that's going to be had for your linebackers if he is going to be back for 2025. We'll see on that one. But like you mentioned with the special teams, like Tyler Medikevich is another one of those guys where you're primarily looking at him for his special teams. And as you mentioned, you didn't really see that this year from him like you saw whenever he was in a Steelers uniform in the past. So that's someone that I feel like you don't need to bring back.
The Monte KZ, at times has been a starter for them. Obviously, they went out and got Deshaun Elliott this past year to replace him, basically. So maybe a statement being made there. Certainly fine safety depth to have, but he was making $3 million. I don't think he would return at that same number if they did bring him back this offseason. Where are you at with the Monte KZ?
Honestly, like as the player goes, I really like what Devontae KZ brings to the Steelers. I feel like he's a nice complement and a nice like third safety on the back end with Deshaun Elliott and Minkah Fitzpatrick. But as far as bringing him back for 2025, outside of just like what the player brings on the field, I feel like maybe they do look a different direction. I mean, we're talking about a lot of change wanting to happen so far, and I feel like it's got to come from somewhere. And there's not a ton of players that got significant playing time that we're talking about being or not being brought back. And I feel like Devontae KZ could be one of those guys that played more significantly than in a lot of the other ones we've talked about so far, but could be moved on from. Like you mentioned, he's probably going to want more money than he was getting at the $3 million. The Steelers could probably use that money elsewhere, and they've got some contracts that they have to pay this offseason. I would lean no right now, mainly just because I think that from the safety room, maybe they look for a little bit more change defensively. I feel like everybody's talking about change, whether it's coaching staff or whether it's players. Some of that change has got to come from somewhere, including players that see the field quite often.
Yeah, this one's interesting. He'll turn 32 this upcoming season, or in the offseason, he'll turn 32. So he's certainly getting up there. The thing that I keep coming back to, and again, like he was a 7th round rookie, who even knows what he would have done. Unfortunately, like the Ryan Watts situation was really scary to me, has kind of muddied the safety depth that you maybe expected to have for maybe not in 2024, but would have expected with some development that Ryan Watts could maybe be a third safety for 2025. He recently posted on his Instagram story that he had neck surgery. Those, like when they diagnose those stingers, man, it's scary. Like it's crazy with what's happening. You saw how the Trenton Thompson situation went. I think there's a lot of uncertainty if Ryan Watts is going to be able to resume playing football. And yeah, they could certainly probably find safety depth cheaper. I'm kind of leaning towards him coming back, and I think it's going to be cheaper. Like I think he's going to want to be back. Maybe he does try to find greener pastures, but then ends up circling back. That's what the Steelers are going to do. Like what they do with all their free agents. Hey, go out to the market, see what you can get, come back to us. We'll see if we want to match it. I don't think that there is going to be that much out there for Devontae KZ, and I think they're going to bring him back.
Yeah, that's the first one that I think agree disagree on.
Yeah. Some other defensive backs here, and this is where we can talk about maybe some change taking place if we wanted to. We talked about Dante Jackson briefly, but didn't say how we felt about that. And then Cam Sutton is also a free agent, turning 30 years old this offseason. So where are we at with both those guys?
I'll start with Cam Sutton. Listen, if you watched our episode whenever the news broke that he was being signed to the Steelers, you know how we felt. We didn't air those grievances on any other episode because we said we'd get out of it right away. So you knew how we felt about the person being on the Steelers, as far as how Smitty and I felt about it. Including those feelings and then seeing the play on the field, I feel like he did not play that well, especially later on in the season. And it feels like the locker room felt that way at times, seeing what was happening and then people talking about the defense doing their job. And I just feel like he is a bigger problem than he is a solution on the defense. And he's not the player he was whenever he was in Pittsburgh the first time. To me, this is one of the easiest ones on the list to just say, no, you do not bring him back.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same bucket. You know that I wouldn't have brought him back to begin with. And I think it went even worse than I expected. Like, that's the thing is like when I didn't want him back, it had nothing to do with the football player. And I kind of thought he was going to be good once he came back into the fold and was playing that role. To couple that with him playing as poorly as he did, and not only like individually, but also impacting guys at other levels because of what he was doing and the way that he was playing. Like that's one where, man, it takes a village. Like one guy can ruin it for 10 others. And I think that we saw that with the way that the Steelers defense trended once we saw him get back into the lineup. So yeah, this is an easy no for me. If he was on the roster, like I would go this direction. You know what I'd do? I'd cut him. Smitty from around the 412 here. And while I may not have much hair, the hair that I do have will not be cut by anybody besides Keek at Keek's Barbershop. My friend Christian Circle, been with us since day one. Keek's Barbershop, located 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Download the app, The Cut. Book an appointment with Christian today, or you can do walk-in with Tony or Ashley. But again, Keek's Barbershop, 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Go check them out. Old school vibe in there. Absolutely love it. Cannot recommend them enough. Wouldn't go anywhere else. Maybe I'll see you there. but he's a free agent, so you don't have to worry about going that direction. Just don't sign him to a new contract. And then Dante Jackson, and this one's interesting. Obviously, came over in the Deontay Johnson trade. 5 interceptions, so the ball production was there. But I think if you're a Steelers fan and were watching the games, probably not indicative of the play that he gave you this season in totality. I think he's a good zone corner. But you look at man, he was getting exposed at times when they would ask him to press or play man. And that's not the type of player that he is, but it's kind of the player that they need for this defense. So it's tough. Because you're playing half fields when you got Joey Porter Jr. Stylistically, it's hard to put those two together and build a defense around when those are your two guys. So it's interesting to me. I would say that I would not bring him back, but going from a predictive standpoint, I think the team will. My concern is that won't just be checking a box for them and saying okay, we have this guy as a placeholder, but we still want to draft a corner. My concern is that he ends up still being in that same role as a starting outside corner for the next year. And I don't think that they can get away with doing that. So I'm going to say he's back, even though I think I'd do a different direction.
So would you just not bring him back because you think the Steelers would start him? Is that really what it is? If he was cornerback 2, would you be fine with bringing him back? Because that's how I would feel. I think that they could improve at the position, or at least they should try to improve at the position to go alongside with Joey Porter Jr. But I would bring him back if that meant that he could be a rotational or depth corner on the outside.
Yeah,
but I think that you need to improve the position as well.
I think for me, where it gets tough is I don't want to completely bury Corey Trice. I think Corey Trice is a more talented player if he can stay healthy.
Good point.
So I feel like if you're drafting a guy and bringing Dante Jackson back, we're never going to find out what Corey Trice is. Maybe he plays in certain packages. He can play big slot. He can match up with tight ends in the slot. But really, I think that there's more to tap into there at his age with what he hasn't shown than what I know Dante Jackson is. So would I be fine with having Dante Jackson on the roster? Sure. Just not in the role that he's going to be in if he's brought back, whether that is as a starter or that is as the primary backup. It still means Corey Trice is CB4 at that point.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And I think that Corey Trice is definitely somebody that I would want to see play more too, get more playing time, and actually see the field defensively. And hopefully he stays healthy to be able to do so. I just think the Steelers are going to bring Dante Jackson back.
Yeah, I agree. Again, this is supposed to be predictive. So, I missed a receiver, and I don't know how I missed him. The big trade deadline acquisition, Mike Williams. He's actually right at the top of the list here. I just had it scrolled down a little too far. So, we've been getting a lot of questions on the afternoon drive regarding Mike Williams. Did they just have trouble getting him to fit in the offense? Do they want him back? Do they like the player enough to bring him back and say with a full off season, he'll be able to contribute more? This goes back to we're talking about not being able to find the space for Van Jefferson because they need to redo the wide receiver room. If you're carrying over 4 of the same receivers from the worst wide receiver room, what are we doing? Who are we even replaced? Just Van Jefferson is getting replaced from this receiver room. That's not good enough to me when you talk about reshaping this room. I think Mike Williams does one thing very well. And at times, you saw Russell Wilson be able to get the most out of it. Not enough. And I don't think that this is a particularly great fit for him at this point in his career with what he's trying to accomplish, probably. I think he's better off, as opposed to being a Steelers number 3 option-ish. He's probably better just going what DeAndre Hopkins got going on with the Chiefs now, where he's the 5th guy. And he's catching 1 pass a game, but he's ring chasing. If Mike Williams can find a spot like that to latch onto where he can just run a go route 4 times a game, perfect fit. I don't see Pittsburgh having a desire to bring him back.
Maybe he takes Amari Cooper's roster spot in Buffalo.
And that actually be we know Josh Allen's got the arm to get it out of him. Yeah, it's possible. I hope they don't just swap spots. Because I know there's some Amari Steelers
I hope
better.
That's something we mentioned last week too. I hope we don't either. But Mike Williams, to me, easy no. And the reasons you were saying are perfectly why too. If you're going to want change out of your team, specifically on offense, your wide receiver room cannot stay the same. I just don't think that it worked out for Mike Williams. We were intrigued by the trade. I was excited about the trade when it did happen. I thought it could bring a little bit of more juice. Not that I thought it was going to be an all-star move, but thought it could bring more, especially he in his first game with the Steelers, 1 catch, 1 touchdown.
Yeah.
And then after that, not a lot happened. And like you had mentioned, and I think that's a good point, I don't think that if you're Mike Williams, the Steelers is a desirable spot to want to return to either. So if I were him, I would, like you said, just go ring chasing at this point in your career. I just don't think the Steelers, not necessarily that they wouldn't want him back at all because they did trade for him, but I don't think they're going to bring him back because you got to change something about that room. And Mike Williams, from his perspective, I just don't see why on earth you would ever want to be back in Pittsburgh looking at their current offensive situation.
And based off what we talked about at the beginning of the show, ring chasing means signing with the Kansas City Chiefs. So best of luck trying to get one of those roster spots, Mike Williams. Let's go down to, this is a curious case. Not necessarily, I think it's an easy answer for the Steelers, but Dan Moore, because you look at what he did in the first half of the season, and man, like, he was really good. And I was like, this guy is going to get a very nice contract in free agency. I still think he'll do well for himself just because he's been so reliable and started a ton of games for the Steelers in that spot. But like, I was thinking, man, is this guy going to push for like 17 to 20 mil a year? And like, maybe he still does. Like, I know there was a projection 3 years, 51 million, which is 17 mil a year. That's Dan Morgan did that. Great. It ain't going to be in Pittsburgh. He's not going to be back. They spent back-to-back first-round picks on tackles, Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu. That's the tackle duo that they want to play. That's the tackle duo they're certainly going to give a shot to win those jobs. And they're not going to spend the money that it's going to take to retain Dan Moore as insurance in case one of those two things doesn't happen. They'll sign somebody. They'll sign up that tackle. It ain't going to be Dan Moore. He's going to go get money somewhere else. Best luck to him.
I'll say this about Dan Moore. I think that as far as the roster the last few years goes, I would say he's probably one of the more underrated players as far as the fan base views him and what he brought to the team.
Well, he's absolutely overachieved his draft slot. I mean, you drafted
100%. Fourth round pick, being a multi-year left tackle starter. That's something that you don't get that often out of a fourth round pick like you did with him. Was he the best? No, of course not. But was he serviceable? Was he able to be played? Sure. And at many times he was better than the first round pick that we took these last couple seasons as a player. So I think that he's somebody that I think Steeler fans should at least appreciate a little bit more than the way some people will talk about Dan Moore and just the tackles in general. But ultimately, no, I think that he's going to get a contract somewhere else. Deservedly so. Go get paid by somebody else. You're not going to get as much from the Steelers as you're going to be able to make in free agency. So really, I'm telling him to go and sign a different contract because I think it's going to be better for him.
This one, my guy, Elandon Roberts, is a free agent. Interesting because of, like, I expect, unfortunately for him, I think Cole Holcomb gets cut. Obviously, he'd have Patrick Queen in the fold. Peyton Wilson had a nice rookie season. I think that you'd want him to continue on with his development. What do we make of Elandon Roberts' time? Spent 2 years so far in Pittsburgh. Certainly feels like he should have been here a lot earlier than he was. I'd like to see him finish his career here. What do you think?
I think he's back. Elandon Roberts, to me, when you look at this team right now and like who feels like they are a Steeler and who feels like they represent what you want the Steelers to be and what the Steelers have been historically, Elandon Roberts fits that mold for me. And I think that personally for him, now obviously, like, I've never talked to him about this. You've talked to him and I never have, but I think that he wants to be back in Pittsburgh. I think he's vocalized that, and I think it's going to get done. I think that he pairs nicely and does a lot of good things in the middle of that defense, and that's somebody that you should bring back. I think he still, even with his age, plays at a high enough level where he can be a starter for your defense and really be a really good linebacker for you. I think that he has been the last 2 years for the Steelers, and this is an easy yes for me. You bring this guy back, not just because of what he is as a player, but what I was just saying about him in the beginning of talking about him, like what he does for your culture. And there's a lot of talking about Steelers culture lately, but I feel like he is a good part of the Steelers culture. He's one you want in the locker room. He's someone that you want to keep around for the type of player and person that he is in that locker room.
Yeah, he's making $3.5 million last season. I would think worthy of a little bit of a bump. But I think he's going to finish his career in Pittsburgh. How many more seasons is that? I don't know, but I don't think he's done here. And I also think he's going to re-sign. So, I think, we talked about Queen, we talked about Wilson. I think there's a role for all three of those guys. You see how many off-ball linebackers. I think they have a nice little rotation there with skill sets that not everybody has. Like, everybody brings something different to the table. So, yeah, I'm definitely on board with E-Rob coming back, and I think that's the direction that they'll go as well. He's almost like a player coach at this point, and you need those guys. And like you said, feels like one of the few guys that could play on the Steelers teams of past. So definitely on board with bringing him back. I feel like we can talk about the running backs together. One is a UFA, Najee Harris. One is an RFA, and Jaylen Warren. I feel like this seems pretty cut and dry to me, man. Like I know that I appreciate what Najee did. But if you're not picking up his 5th-year option, $6.8 million, I don't know what the case would be to re-sign him as a free agent for much more than that. And I think he's going to get much more than that. I understand it's a great running back draft class. There's like 30 guys probably that could get drafted this year. Jim Nagy, the director of the Senior Bowl, said as much. But there is going to be a team that doesn't want to go that route and values the durability that Najee brings to the table, the veteran leadership that he brings to the table, and just the workhorse that he has been through his first 4 seasons in the NFL. And James Conner, off the running back market before free agency even hits, signing the 2-year deal, or was it 2-year deal or 3-year? 2-year deal with the Cardinals in season. So, like, running back free agent market, very barren. It is a great spot for Najee Harris to be in right now. I think he's going to do very well. I think we'll get $10+ million on the open market. Do not expect the Pittsburgh Steelers to be that team. If for whatever reason, every team in the NFL decides they want to go the draft route, maybe Najee Harris circles back and tries to come back. At the same time, because of exactly what I'm saying, I don't know that I'd want the Steelers to do that. Like, I think that they could find really good value on day 2 of this draft. And for as much as a proven commodity as Najee is, and I appreciate that, I'm going a different direction. I think the team will as well.
I think so too. And what you just mentioned, if you don't bring him back on his 5th-year option at $6.8 million, then what are you doing? We both agreed last offseason that, like, we would have at least picked up the 5th-year option, not necessarily giving him a contract. But the fact that they didn't even do that, it's just writing on the wall all season long that he was not going to be back. That opinion has not changed for me. I just don't see a world where the Steelers are bringing him back, even if there is not a ton of action in free agency. I just feel like the Steelers are going to go a different route. And he's not going to be back, and that opens the door for the other guy that we're talking about, Jaylen Warren, being an RFA. He's easily coming back from me. We've talked about it really since they have not picked up Najee's 5th-year option, and talked about how in 2025 he's going to be the Steelers' number 1 back, at least to start the season, and we'll see where that goes with whoever else they bring in. But it's finally his time to take over the backfield for the Steelers and be their premier back for the season. It's an easy one to bring back. You pair him with hopefully one of those rookie running backs that you were talking about. 30 draftable players at the running back position is an insane number. I feel like there's several years where you probably don't even reach half of that in this in the NFL draft.
Two or three probably in round 1. I think there's a lot on day 2. There's gonna be guys on day 3.
I mean, that's crazy. I mean, we've mentioned a few guys that we wouldn't mind the Steelers drafting, and we'll talk about that as the season goes along with the draft stuff coming up. But I just think that it's such an easy answer that obviously Jaylen Warren is going to be back. We knew this last season before the season even started. As soon as Najee's 5th-year option wasn't picked up, Jaylen Warren was coming back. He's going to be your starter in 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's an RFA. The way that works is you place a tender on him, first, second, right of first refusal. I think they're just going to sign him to a new deal. Like, I expect they'll do that well in advance of having to do, like, so I don't think that it's going to be like a contentious thing or a tenuous thing. I think they'll sign him to a new contract. I actually have like no idea what to even think that contract is going to be. But I think you could have made the case to do it last year and rewarded him for kind of overachieving as an undrafted free agent. Didn't happen. I think now's the time to do so and give him a nice little pay bump. So, yeah, Jaylen's back for me. And then this is going to be the one we're going to be, I think, on the same page here. I think that most of the fan base is on the same page. Most important position in football, the quarterback position. All the quarterbacks that saw time last year for the Pittsburgh Steelers are free agents. We already talked about Kyle Allen. Now we got to talk about Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Two very different players, two very different points in their career. Which direction are the Pittsburgh Steelers going to go? What do you think?
I do not care if Russell Wilson and the Steelers are already talking about contract negotiations. We touched on this on last week's episode. Just because you're talking about contract negotiations does not mean a contract is going to be coming. And for the Steelers, I just don't think that Russell Wilson is who you should tie your hitch to and ride on that wagon. I think that the middle of the season when he first came in, that kind of rejuvenated what was stalling out for a Justin Fields offense, at least for a few games, and it looked really good. But as the season went along, I thought Russell Wilson got worse, and I think that play diminished the offense, and you saw the outcome not just on the field but on the scoreboard. They were scoring less. They weren't getting as many yards and making those plays downfield. And I just think that the bad parts and honestly the year one stuff that you saw in Denver of Russ was coming out. And are you going to want to pay a contract to a 36, 37-year-old Russell Wilson at that point whenever you could just bring back Justin Fields? And I'm lumping them together because I feel like you have to do that in this conversation, talking about the two of them. Justin Fields was serviceable for you as a starter. You didn't really have a reason to go away from him during the season. The Steelers were 4-2. Like I mentioned, the offense did get a little stagnant over a couple games with him, but at the same time, it saw flashes with him that you never saw with Russell Wilson in the offense, especially in the red zone. And I just think that it makes more sense for the Steelers if you're going to have a stopgap quarterback between whoever you think the next quarterback is going to be for the Steelers or whenever they make that decision, because it's definitely the glaring issue right now. I mean, Art Rooney II today pretty much said so as much. Mm-hmm. I think that Justin Fields just makes too much sense as far when you compare the two side by side. He's probably going to cost less money. He's younger. He brings a different element with his legs. The offense was better in the red zone. And I just think that that's the quarterback that they should roll with. I thought when Russell Wilson first came in, maybe you got something out of him. But as the season prolonged, it just looked worse and worse, and I just don't think the Steelers should have anything to do with it.
Spotrac has the projections as Justin Fields getting 1 year, $8.9 million, Russell Wilson getting 2 years, $77 million. So if those are anywhere close, sign me up for the Justin Fields side of that.
$77 million?
Mm-hmm.
That is, I'm sorry, that's nuts. That is nuts to me. I mean,
I'm going to say he doesn't get that, but Spotrac's normally pretty good. I mean, so we'll see. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, the Raiders have Pete Carroll there now, and that's been widely discussed. John Spytek coming over from Tampa, I think that he'd push back against that. But we'll see. We'll see if Russ can get that. But for me, it's more so this. Russell Wilson, we saw what the Steelers were with Russell Wilson and what they were capped at. They were a good team that was nowhere close to being good enough to beat the elites of the NFL. What would be the assumption that they would be any better 1 year later into Russell Wilson's career? Like, you're not getting better play another year into it. Him 1 year older, one more year physically declining. I think there's such a small percentage chance that Justin Fields turns out to be an actual answer for them, but I would take that as opposed to just running it back, knowing what the result of this is going to be. I think that there's a good chance that Russell Wilson's even a better quarterback in 2025, 2026 than Justin Fields was, but not enough for, one, the financial difference between the two, and two, for it to actually make a difference for where the Steelers are going to get to with that quarterback play. So it kind of goes back to the idea for me where I said, just sign the cheapest guy. Like, build everything else up. Give me the cheaper guy, and then you take the big swing in 2026. The idea with going to Justin Fields over Russell Wilson kind of plays into that, with a small caveat that, like, there's a small chance that Justin Fields has an unbelievable year, I guess, and he's young enough where he could be the guy going forward. But it's more so about beyond 2025 than it is for me 2025 itself.
But like you mentioned, there's something about Justin Fields that he has a little bit of that shine still.
You can't quit him. Yeah. I don't know. I brought that up to Alan, and he's like, yeah, I don't know if the NFL feels that way because he sat around, like, no one traded for him.
Maybe it's like your inner conscious because he's an Ohio State guy.
Yeah, but I don't. To be honest, I don't think he's very good. So, like, I don't know if that's the case, but I see it from a majority of the fan base. Even the way that they talk about this guy, it's pretty crazy. Like, there's still a lot of people that think that he could be a franchise quarterback, and I'm certainly not within that group.
Throwing a Pirates reference in there. Mm-hmm. He is to you what Jeff Locke was to me. There was just something about Jeff Locke that I'm like, you can't give up on him.
Hey, Jeff Locke, the problem with Jeff Locke is he overachieved for half the season 2013. If he was just always a number 5 starter, would have been fine in that role, and I don't think people would have complained. But it was the regression from what he looked like for that first half in 2013 to what he ended up being.
But we will always have that 8 inning or 8 1/3 innings, 1-hit game
that no one was watching.
No one was watching except for me on a Sunday afternoon.
Oh no, you're talking about a different one. He threw a complete game against the Marlins, but no one was watching because it was during the Penguins playoffs.
Oh, okay. I'm talking about a different one. I think the one I'm talking about is against the Brewers. I believe.
Or is the one he outdoled Mad Bum at PNC Park against the Giants?
That's the one I was talking about, and that bum of a catcher hit a single home run to left field. Yeah, yes, Eric Kratz.
That's my memory, dude. That's the stuff I remember, but I can't tell you what I had for breakfast this morning. But anyways, I don't know how we got to that. For people that are strictly Steelers fans, like, what are these guys talking about? Anyways, I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. You mentioned, having conversations with Russ. I brought this up last week. Like, that has to happen. I don't expect they're going to go the direction that Russell Wilson necessarily wants them to. I'll be honest, like, I think Art Rooney's comments today are more damning towards Russ's chances than they are to Justin's, just because he's really the one that closed out the season and ended up being the one responsible, or at the most important position, was mostly responsible for that result being the case. So I
expect the one they brought in to be the guy. They didn't bring in Justin Fields to necessarily be the guy in 2024. They specifically brought in Russell Wilson to be that person. To
win them a playoff game. That was the entire point of this past season. I don't think that if you were to give everybody in the organization truth serum, they didn't expect to win the Super Bowl this year. But I to tell you, they probably expected to win a playoff game. That's why you go and get Russell Wilson. They didn't do it. So don't know how you run it back. I know the same thing could be said about.
I would say you mentioned the Spotrac values for their contracts. If Russell Wilson, and like you mentioned, there's some variance, but normally they're not that far off of the values. If Russell Wilson is going to make 2 years, $77 million, that means he's making $38.5 million a year. Meanwhile, Justin Fields would be 1 year, 8.8. Russell Wilson would literally be making $30 million more than Justin Fields.
Yeah, I guess the one thing,
no-brainer to me.
The one thing I'll add to that is maybe pretty much all of Russ's money on that is in year 2, where it doesn't matter. It's monopoly money. Like, if the guaranteed money is like 15 to 20, whatever, then it makes more sense and it's palatable because year 2 doesn't matter. He would never see it. But the other thing that I want to add is I don't think Justin signs for 1 year. I think they want, like Art Rooney mentioned this too. I think they want to get a quarterback on a multi-year deal. And I think it makes sense to, because even if you're taking that swing and you want to have a contingency plan in place in 26 as well.
What a lot of college football teams are now, where NIL, you're basically trying to have a starter from NIL every single year. You don't want to be that free agency in the Steelers. But that's
I think he won
last season.
I think you want Justin Fields in place in 26 as well, even if you are finally taking that big swing, which I think 26 is the year to do so, not 2025. But good conversation. I'll be excited to see what the comments think. By the way, gotta give a shout out. A lot of people tapped into the YouTube for the last episode that we put out on here. It's funny because like I was looking at the numbers and I was like, man, we must have fell out of the algorithm by not like having a show for a while. And then you texted me. It was like, what happened with the Steelers? It was like just said Steelers show. And I was like, what? And you were like 1.4K or something like that. And then I'm going through the comments and I'm like, yeah, these are people from Afternoon Drive that found around the 412 finally. So I'm glad that we got a lot of the community over here. If you are somebody that also watches Afternoon Drive, appreciate you finding around the 412. Hope you stick around. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know when a new episode is posted. If you're also a Penguins fan, we'll be dropping an episode of that this week. And then Pirates, I guess, on the way at some point down the road. Spring training starts next month. So actually, first spring training game less than a month away, and we're running a Jared Jones giveaway autographed jersey right now, exclusively to YouTube. So it's on our Twitter, but you got to reply with a screenshot of you being subscribed to the YouTube channel to be eligible to win. So do that as well. But yeah, you got anything else? It's super late here, by the way.
Speaking of the Penguins are playing the San Jose Sharks. One period is over currently. These are like the bottom of the two teams in the NHL right now. Is it
0-0? I'm assuming because you said it like
0-0. It's 0-0. This is some riveting stuff. I mean, you're talking about two of the bottom 5 teams in the NHL right now.
Talked about a couple of our sponsors already, but right above Tyler right now, Marcelo Electric, our buddy Brandon Marcelo, aka Boots' electric company, also works with his brother Joe. They started it recently. What?
AKA Boots' electric company. As if anybody is going to know him by Boots.
Yeah, his nickname is Boots, and it's a stupid thing. Like,
where do they service, Smitty?
Beaver County, Butler County, Lawrence County, and Allegheny County. All 4 of them.
There you go.
So if you're in that area, residential or in commercial. I'm said industrial. But anyway, maybe I don't know. I don't know what all they could do.
I feel like that's not a bad term to use.
But anyways, if you're listening somewhere else, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe over there as well. Check out the links in the description because we got all of our sponsors down there, including the link to Marcelo Electric, their Facebook page, his email's there, cell number directly in there. You could prank call him, I guess, if you want. Let him know that you around the 412 sent you. Everything Custom Designs, our friend Haley Wagner Small Business, which by the way, I'll put that out there right now. You got like 4 days to get an order in. Otherwise, you have to wait until April or May. Expecting a new baby. So she's going to be shutting down the shop for a little bit. So Tyler knows all about that. Expecting the new baby. Joe Frick also. Shout out to Joe Frick of the Around the 412 Fantasy Show for having his babe. I want to emphasize this enough. I don't even know if I can say baby boy. Jonah's massive. Did you see the picture?
Oh, I saw him.
He's pushing 10. He's pushing 10 pounds.
What, 9 pounds, 14 ounces, or 9 pounds, 11 ounces? Something
9-11.
Something big.
9-10.
9-10. I told Kennedy, and she said, nope, absolutely not. There's no chance I would have pushed that out.
Joe, I was on FaceTime with Joe earlier because he was giving me some tips on how to use this thing that I needed to use to make a YouTube video. And he was like, yeah, they were saying how well Sarah was pushing everything. They're like, where's he at? Where's he at? And then he came out and they were like, oh, that's why.
He was just stuck.
Yeah. So big boy, shout out to the Fricks, Joe and Sarah. Love you guys. Glad everything that went well and appreciate you guys. Also in the description, speaking of Around the 412 stuff, we got our shorts down there, DC4L Customs. Not sure if it's short season for you wherever you're living right now. Be sure to check those out. And then Tyler mentioned Game Changers earlier, and AT412 at checkout will save you $10 over there. That's gamechanger.la, pick6.la, Steelers Designs, Penguins Designs. If you're like me, Yeet Wrestling Designs over there as well. Just recently dropped a new pack, but really anything. They just dropped some F1 stuff. They dropped an F1 pack today. So they got a ton of stuff going on over there. Check them out. Save yourself $10 using use code AT412. Follow us everywhere as well at Around the 412, all of our social medias. Except right now I don't have TikTok on my phone. So like if you haven't seen a TikTok from us in a while.
You're one of the people that deleted it.
Yeah.
Wow. There's a lot of amateur hours over here. I will say I have not been on TikTok in over a week. Since it shut down, I have not been on TikTok, even though I still have it on my phone, because I looked at my screen time and it was bad. Let's just say it was bad. So I am kind of giving myself a break to revitalize some of that time.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I still have TikTok on my phone, but I feel like I have talked to so many people that deleted it, and I'm like,
because it's probably all people that are like me, where like you're always hovering on that board of not having phone space. And I was like, okay, here's an opportunity with an app that's not going to exist, doesn't exist anymore for us to delete. And then
12 hours later.
12 hours later. So anyway, I don't have it right now, but you can follow us over there. Follow us on all social media, so be sure to do that. But yeah, that's it. Like I said, Penguin show later in the week. Don't know exactly when that will be dropping, but you'll see it. Hit that notification bell and you'll know when the episode is dropped, and be back here again for another Steelers show next week. For Tyler, for Smitty, this has been the Around the 412 Steelers show. We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.